You have to press these? Okay. Can we turn mics on? Apparently they're not on. I did. Are they on now? All right. And Jennifer Eason DeMao, good morning. And Director Butler, would you come up to the microphone and please introduce yourself to the crowd?
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you very much for having us this week at the meeting. I just wanted to say a couple words of thanks. First of all, I wanted to thank Kathy and Dwayne and Daniel for taking us out yesterday to see the resource. EPA continues to be very proud of the work that we get to do with national estuary programs, and yesterday was a fantastic way to kind of see the work that y'all are able to do, making leverage of the funds that EPA provides. They took us to see the Brevard Zoo at the HUD SeaWorld, seagrass nursery, a second seagrass nursery from Sea and Shoreline, and the Jones Pier Park. 3 fantastic projects. Y'all continue to set an example among national estuary programs for how to get restoration and watershed protection done in a collaborative way. We want to thank you for that commitment to collaboration and innovation and outcome-focused programs. Thank you very much for the work that you do.
We also have Dr. Kai Raines with us this morning, and she's also going to be presenting. And her husband is Dr. Mark Raines. He's Florida's chief scientist. Both are professors at the University of South Florida. And do you have students here with you today? And would you like to introduce them? Sure. Welcome. We're happy to have you. Terrific. And we are aware of the devastating fire that destroyed the USF Marine Science Lab on the St. Pete campus. Please extend our thoughts to Dr. Tom Frazier, who's Dean of the college. Next, are there any revisions to the agenda?
Chair Hurd, Jennifer DeMeo just wants to do a quick update on EPA. She's our regional coordinator for the work we do, and so she wanted to just mention a few words on, how we move forward with Region 4.
Terrific. Come to the mic.
Morning. Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. It is hard to tell if the mic's on when you're talking into the mic.
Yeah.
So I thought that I'd just take this opportunity to update you on a couple of EPA items while I'm here. Usually if I'm not here, I am participating in the meeting, but I'm just watching it over YouTube when it's being streamed. So wanted to let you guys know that EPA awarded the IRL its 5th and final year of IIJA funding just a few weeks ago. So they have that. So just as a reminder, that's $909,800 per year for the past 5 years. So this is the last installment of that money. And as our director just mentioned, we saw several of those projects yesterday, and great job implementing those funds. The second item I wanted to make you aware of at the national level, the national program at headquarters is in the process of revising several of the guidance documents. And the one that I wanted
to make you aware of is the program evaluation guidance document. And as you know, EPA headquarters, in conjunction with the region, we come down every 5 years and they evaluate the program. And so that guidance is being revised, and we expect that that guidance will be released to the regions and to the NEPs sometime in October for immediate implementation. And I say immediate because the Indian River Lagoon is in the first group. And so their package will be due to headquarters in February or March. So that does present a bit of a stressful time, I would say, for the Indian River Lagoon to be able to see the guidance, implement the guidance, and create a package consistent with EPA's expectations. So I just wanted to bring that to y'all's awareness. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys so much.
And one other point I'd like to add, when we actually go through the PE site visits, we'll be, basically, having you all participate in some of those site visits. It's a formal process, but, an important one. And while Jennifer said it's a lot of stress, won't be a lot of stress for us. I've been through 2 of these now. And so we'll be ready for it, and we've got all that information ready to go. So, but it is an important review process at the federal level.
Thank you. Let's see, are there any resolutions, recognition letters and awards?
None from staff.
Okay. Any public comment? I don't have any request to speak forms, but if you would like to address this, we will move on to water quality reports. First, the Northern and Central Lagoon from Lauren Hall.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
Chair Hurd, as well as members of the Board of Directors. My name is Lorraine Simpson, and I am the Supervising Environmental Scientist at St. John River Water Management District in the coastal section. And I will be presenting on behalf of Lauren Hall today on the conditions in the Northern and Central IRL. And so the first thing we're going to begin with is precipitation over the last few months. This data was from early February and extends through April of 27th of 2026. What you're looking at essentially is how many inches of rain each one of these cells was produced or was given. And so your green dots are 0.1 through 3 inches, and then as you move up, you're anywhere from 3 up to 12 inches. And so in February and March of 2026, we had an average of 1.7 inches across the district. But as you can see in April, that significantly increased to an average of 4 inches across the district. The colors, though, show a little bit difference when you're looking down in the southern regions. And so you have anywhere from 3 to 6 inches in that yellow, the orange is 6 to 9 inches, and then we have the rust color a little bit south of Palm Bay, which was receiving 9 to 12 inches. Unfortunately, this still has us in a D2 drought, and so we still need a lot more rain, hopefully over the coming months. And so you'll see some of the water quality data that I move into kind of being reflected in the fact that we had this large pulse of rain in April. I'm now going to move into our continuous water quality monitoring stations. These stations are located throughout the Indian River Lagoon, and they're essentially meters that take water quality parameters every hour. And this data is readily available on our website. We have a site in the Southern Mosquito Lagoon, one on the Titusville Pier, one in Cocoa, just south of the 528 Bridge, one in Banana River. We have one right outside of the Ugalli River, and then one down in Vero Beach, which is just north of SR 60. All of the data that you're going to see presented on these following slides is from February through April, and the colors of the line graph will denote where the station is, and so you can kind of cross-reference with the map to the right. So to begin with, we have water depth. It has come up slightly this month, but this is definitely on par with what we should be expecting to see. In the spring, in the winter, we have low water levels. They start to move up in the spring, and then they hit their peak within the fall region, or the fall timing. Just a reminder that the data zone in Vero was deployed higher up in the water column, so it looks like it's a little bit off in scale, but it actually is on par with all the other water quality stations. The next parameter is salinity. Salinity is very important to track because a lot of the estuarine species that we have live in some sort of threshold of salinity. And so when we see long pulses or chronic salinity changes, this is when it causes a little bit of concern for us as scientists. Everything is looking good so far. We saw a small increase in the Mosquito Lagoon, but everything else is stable in Titusville, Banana River, Cocoa, and Ugali. We did see a drop in salinity in Vero, and that's that gray bar or the gray line, and that coincides with that large amount of precipitation that we received in early April. At the very end here on April 27th, you can see that it's starting to rise again, which is a good sign. The next slide we have is water temperature. This too is important to track the health and productivity of species, estuarine species in the Indian River Lagoon. And we are doing fine at this point in time. It's slightly increasing. It will continue to increase over the coming months. And so we'll just be keeping our eyes on this. The next slide is dissolved oxygen. So this is how much oxygen is dissolved within the water column, and all of your species within these estuarine habitats need oxygen to be able to be productive and survive. And so once we get down to hypoxic conditions, which is depleted oxygen in the water column, this is when we are concerned because these plants and animals may not be able to be productive. The line of hypoxia is at 2 milligrams per liter, which you can see the dotted line up above or down below. We are well above that. We really don't start to have cause of concern until we see about 3 milligrams per liter. So right now we're doing good. The water the water temperature is low, but as we see water temperature start to rise, this is potentially when we can start to see oxygen depletion take place. And so we'll keep our eyes on this over the coming months. The next parameter that I'm going to present is turbidity. Turbidity is essentially how cloudy the water is or how hazy it is. This is the particulates that are within the water column. Seagrasses need light to be able to be productive, and so when you have high turbidity, you might see declines in seagrass productivity. Right now, there were no real turbidity increases in Cocoa and Vero, which is the green and gray bars. We did see a spike of turbidity in the Mosquito Lagoon, and that also coincides with that precipitation front that we saw come through. Down in the Banana River in Ugali, we have a lot going on. We have these abrupt changes, but they come down very quickly. And so this can be one of two things. It could be a sensor malfunction, which we need to look more into, or it could be some sort of fast, short-lived algal bloom that moves through the system. And so no cause for concern at this point. If it was more sustained, we would start to look into that. The next parameter is fluorescent dissolved organic matter, or FDOM. This is just the amount of organic matter that is within the water column. And so this is usually used as a proxy to understand what is coming off of the watershed. So if you have sediments coming from canals, you will pick that up with FDOM. We are seeing everything pretty stable. We did see a huge increase, we did see an increase in FDOM in the Vera site, and that's those gray bars, and that was in April, which is not surprising due to the precipitation and the fact that that site is located around a lot of freshwater inputs. It did start to come down by April 27th, so that's a good sign. The water is being flushed. The next parameter is chlorophyll A. Chlorophyll A is essentially the amount of algal biomass in a system. So we'll use this as a proxy for algal blooms. Just because we see algal biomass in the system does not necessarily mean that it's harmful. There's a lot of diatoms and plankton that are not of the health implications. And so when we're looking at these graphs, one thing I do want to note, these graph axes are off. The graph to the left, we are 0 to 60, and the graph to the right is 0 to 30. So imagine the graph to the right is pushed down, and the lines would look a little bit similar. So those large jumps that you're seeing aren't as extreme as you may think. We do see some elevated chlorophyll A, and that we usually start, or visible bloom is around 10 RFUs. Once again, just because it's a visual bloom doesn't necessarily make it harmful. So while we are seeing elevated levels, there's really nothing of concern at this point in time, but we will keep our eyes on this as the temperatures start to warm up. So how does this water quality data, especially our turbidity and chlorophyll A, translate into water clarity? These metrics are taken using a Secchi disk. This is not part of our continuous water quality monitoring data. We take this monthly, so this is a snapshot data set. And the red and the orange colors, that's essentially how the numbers in general, how far down you can see within the water column. And so the red and the orange means that you can't see very far down in the water column. And then the blues and the greens mean you can see much deeper. So if you see a light blue at 1 meter, that means we can see 3 feet down into the water column, which is great. So the bluer letters or colors are what we really want to see. We are seeing scattered Secchi depths throughout the region. We have good water quality down in the southern region, and then some of lower values up in the northern, central, and Banana River region. This is a snapshot in time, though, and so we just have to keep in mind this is a very dynamic system, and these things can change quickly. So we'll just keep our eyes on this over time. And then I want to switch gears very quickly to our seagrass maps. We are very excited that we just finished up our 2025 mapping for seagrass extents within the Indian River Lagoon. Hopefully you've seen these figures before. We do this every 2 years. The hope is that we can present those numbers today, but we're waiting till our board meeting next week. And so Mr. Bornick, he will get front row seat to that show, and hopefully he will share it widely because we have some cautiously optimistic news. For this data set as well, we will make sure that we send it to Erin so she gets it out to everybody and you guys can share with your stakeholders. What I can share, though, is the extent of caulerpa throughout the Indian River Lagoon. And so caulerpa is a native macroalgae species. It's a green macroalgae that lives in the same niche as seagrass. So it performs a lot of the same ecosystem services, just to a different magnitude. So when we're talking about submerged aquatic vegetation, it is important to talk about seagrass, but it's great to couple it with this macroalgae because it too is just as important. So in 2023, we decided that we should start to map this species, and we did a small region. So we did from the Mosquito Lagoon down to just around Melbourne. And what you can see is the 2023 seagrass map on the left, and on the right, we have overlaid it with the 2023 caulerpa map. And there was 15,000 hectares of caulerpa mapped in 2023 in this map, as opposed to, I think, just the over 6,000 hectares of seagrass that were mapped. So when we saw this, we thought we should definitely do this again, and we should do it through the entirety of the IRL, because this is definitely a missing piece to this conversation. And so in 2025, we did that. And this is just a small snapshot of that same region to do a comparison. But in 2023, we had that 15,000 hectares. Well, in 2025, we just had around 4,000 hectares. So that's a 72% decline in caulerpa coverage within this region. Why would that have happened? Well, it was this slug, which is literally the size of your pinky fingernail, that only feeds on caulerpa prolifera, which is the main species found in this region. And it came through right before our April mapping and really took care of all of that caulerpa. And so we were definitely a little disheartened and overwhelmed at the sudden loss. But I will say that we literally got a picture yesterday that showed that all of that caulerpa that was gone is now back, and it is beautiful. So it's back in the system, and it's back helping to provide those ecosystem services. I do also want to note one other really cool tidbit is that in the northern region of the IRL, you can see in 2023 there was no caulerpa that was mapped, but in the 2025, a bunch of caulerpa did show up. And this caulerpa species that showed up was a species that we have not seen in the IRL since the early 1980s, which was really exciting, but also left us open to a lot of questions. Where did it come from? Why is it here? How did it get here? And so we are now doing some more experimental observations and trying to figure out what it means to have it here. It is native to the region, so it's not a big concern, but it is another piece of that puzzle. And so with that, I will now take any questions.
Questions? Yes.
All right, Lauren, 3 questions. Where is the monitoring station in Vero Beach?
It is just south of SR 60. I don't know the exact location. Yeah.
So it's right near the main relief canal. Yeah, so that the big spikes are
Yep.
You're getting all that urban discharge right there off the main relief canal. Okay. That makes sense for your spikes.
Yeah.
We might want to move that one way or another. Just
Well, I think it's also good to know, right? We
Yeah.
know how much fresh water is coming off of the system because it's there.
Yeah.
And that fresh water can be very detrimental and sometimes.
I would love to move that water west.
Oh, yeah, let's move the water west. Let's keep the CM there,
I know
though.
he would too. Number two, just a question. The severe cold we had in the end of January really had two really bad cold fronts that affected my industry. How did it affect the lagoon and the grasses?
Yeah, we're still waiting to see. So because it happened several months ago, we have to wait until our next monitoring time period, which will be in, I think we begin soon. So the summertime period will be when we can really try to understand what happened. There is concern about water quality within the lagoon. We did have a lot of fish kills. We did have the vegetation, the mangroves that died off. And so all of that biomass made it into the IRL. And so there's probably a lot of nutrients that are in the system right now. It's just kind of cautiously optimistic and waiting. We have that chlorpa that is coming back. And so hopefully that's pulling some nutrients out of the system as well as the seagrasses.
And my last question is just about that. Are the manatees enjoying that new grass?
I hope so. I haven't talked to the manatee people yet, but
I would think so.
There's a substantial amount out there, so they should be okay.
I was on the water in Stewart, and I saw a manatee up on a St. Augustine lawn, just eating the hell out of that lawn. He wiggled himself right up onto the front of the lawn, and it was just devastating that lawn.
I know. They get creative, don't they?
They do.
I've seen them eat mangroves, too. Like, how do they get up there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
And the slugs,
It was on.
okay, and the slugs that are chomping on the callirpa, are they gone?
We think so. The
Well-
crazy part is we hadn't seen those slugs in the system for about 30 years. And they just showed up en masse. And so this is another question. You know, we need to partner with some slug people and figure out what they're up to, because are they gone or are they going to be back this year? We don't know.
Yeah, and then what kind of conditions created their return?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
Exactly.
Are they going to come back next year on April 2nd?
exactly.
Okay, any further
Great question.
questions? Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Now, Dr. Melanie Parker will present the Southern Lagoon.
Good morning, board members. I'm Melanie Parker from the South Florida Water Management District, and I'll cover the Southern Lagoon, really mostly focused on the St. Lucie Estuary, which is where we do most of our work. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Data on these following slides is through April 26th, and if I refer to a 7-day average or a week-long average, that's April 20th through 26th. So the first figure on this slide is looking at total daily inflows from each of the basins in the watershed. And you can see that for the last couple months, flows were very low, total inflows into the estuary, except for that big spike that we see in mid-April. That's following that about 3-day rain event that we had. And during this whole period of time, most of that inflow has come from the tidal basin. There's been no releases from Lake Okeechobee to the St. Lucie Estuary since March of 2025. The table on the bottom right is showing the average inflows from each of those basins for the most recent week-long period. And you can see that we had a grand total of about 274 CFS coming into the estuary last week. Looking at how that has affected salinities in the estuary, we have 3 continuous salinity monitoring sites. The table on the top left is showing the 7-day average for those salinities. At HR1, which is in the North Fork, we saw salinities of about 8 on the surface and 11 on the bottom. And to put that in perspective from when we met 3 months ago, at that location at that time, salinities were 23 and above at that same location. So you can see how that rainfall has made quite a difference recently. At the US 1 bridge, salinities are about 13 on the surface and 15 on the bottom. And at the downstream location, the A1A bridge, salinities are 24 on the surface and 28 on the bottom. Now the table on the bottom there is showing the recover salinity performance measure ranges. And these are optimal salinities for adult oysters, which are used as an indicator species for SERP activities. Optimal range for adult oysters is 10 to 25. with stressful being below that at 5 to 9 or above that greater than 25, and damaging salinities to oysters are less than 5. And so those color codings have been added to the map on the right, showing where those salinities were occurring in the estuary for the week of April 20th through 26th. And the good news is the optimal salinities are located right on the same places where we find most of the oysters in the St. Lucie estuary. And another reason why this is really good is this is the beginning of spawning season for oysters in the estuary, so it's really good timing for those salinities to be optimal. This is just showing salinity again here on the figure on the top. This is daily salinity at those same 3 locations. And really what's to point out here is you can see that really steep decline in salinity following that rainfall event in April. The figure on the bottom is showing salinity again, but this is water column salinity at the US 1 bridge, which is located most closely to our Rio oyster monitoring site. And the color coding in the background of that figure is showing the optimal salinity range, the stressful ranges, and the damaging ranges. And you can see that prior to that rainfall event in April, salinities were just outside of that optimal range, just a little bit too high. They dropped quickly, fell into the lower stressful range for a day or two, and then have been in the optimal range since. So again, that's really good for oysters in the estuary. These 2 figures are showing average salinities for the month of February on the left and the month of April on the right. And again, just to show you how things have changed in the last 3 months. Most of the salinities in February were pretty high, above 25 in most parts, including up into the forks. But now we can see that we have a lot more of a salinity gradient in the estuary, with the lower salinities in the forks, moderate salinities in the middle estuary, and those higher salinities near the inlet. This is the latest data from FWRI, who does the oyster monitoring in the estuary for us. The figure on the top is showing oyster recruitment or larval settlement rates in the estuary for the past couple years. And I've mentioned this before, but you can see we had a really good settlement event last summer in June with about 17.7 spat per shell. That number decreased through the rest of the summer and into the fall as expected. Went to 0 during the winter months, which is what normally happens with oysters, and we are expecting to see that spawning activity start again as water temperatures warm up. And in fact, we just got data after I'd made these slides that they have recorded spat settlement this past month in the estuary. So we're right on target for oyster recruitment this year. The figure on the bottom is showing oyster density at the same location. They do this quarterly. And you can see again, we had a really high number in September last year, 965, which is about double what we normally see. And that's very reflective of that high spat settlement rate that we saw with the recruitment data above. Those numbers have come down, but that's very most likely natural mortality. As those numerous spat grow and take up space, they're going to outcompete each other for space and food resources. And there's also probably been a lot of predation as predators favor higher salinities, and we know we had a pretty dry winter, so there was a lot of predation in the water column and the bottom. So all in all, an average of 464 oysters per meter squared is really good for the St. Lucie estuary. And lastly, I have some updates on our latest seagrass transect monitoring. These are our fixed transects that we survey quarterly. The figures on the left are showing the location of these 4 sites. We have 2 up north at Taylor Creek and Fort Pierce Inlet, 2 near the St. Lucie estuary at the St. Lucie Inlet and Willoughby Creek. And at each of those 4 sites, we have 3 parallel transects at what those little white lines on each of the smaller pictures are indicating. That as they survey this, they too measure percent cover. The figure on the top in the middle is showing average percent cover at each of those 4 sites for the month of February. You can see it's pretty low. We range from about 2% at Taylor Creek up to about 8% at St. Lucie Inlet. The figure on the top right is showing the seagrass species that were present at each of those sites, and we had Haladuli present at all 4. That's indicated in green. It was dominant at the 2 inlet sites, Fort Pierce Inlet and St. Lucie Inlet, and then we had Halophila johnsonii dominant at the other 2 sites. The figure on the bottom is showing very similar data to what's in the middle on the top, except it's showing you what was measured at each of those sites over the last 4 February. So you can see how it's changed from year to year. And we do see lower numbers at all sites this past year. And so we'll see how that shakes out. The team is ready to go out in the month of June to do what we call our regional surveys. And these are over 200 randomly selected stations, ranging from all the way up to at Port Pierce, all the way down past the St. Lucie Inlet, down to the Jupiter Inlet. And they'll do seagrass surveys at all of those sites, measuring percent cover and species composition. So hopefully we'll have a better idea at the end of June how things are looking out there. And that's all I have today, unless there are questions.
Questions for Dr. Parker? Yes.
I just have a couple of comments. First of all, I want to say Lorraine and Dr. Parker, thanks for the report. This is one of the more positive reports I think we've actually had in a while. I mean, they haven't been bad lately, but I haven't been here as long as this guy, but we've had some bad ones in the past. And this is really, these were two very positive reports. And with that, I just wanted to add, and I told Dr. DeFries the other day when we had our pre-meeting about this, I'm really good friends with a lot of our charter captains that go on the lagoon up in the Vero area and in this area. And because a lot of them are former firemen like myself that are still doing that, doing this to do their retirement. And we were at a party for one of the fishing guys that's a former fireman that just turned 65 years old. He had a party and all these guys showed up because they all know each other. And I got to talking to a couple of them that I know very well that wouldn't lie to me or tell me what I want to hear or anything like that. And because they've told me in the past, the lagoon's not doing well right now. But actually, out of the 4 or 5 that I talked to, they have all seen, and these guys are on the water every day, they've all seen improvement, especially in the Vero Beach area, especially from the 17th Street Bridge south. They have seen a vast improvement in seagrass, they said. They've seen a vast improvement in their fishing catches they're doing. And what amazed me is they actually have been catching spotted sea trout again, which we kind of, which we didn't hear a whole lot for a while there, like it was, say, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And so they're absolutely thrilled with this. And to me, that's the guys that are out on the water every day. They see it every day. They drive past the same spot every day. They can see if seagrass has grown or not. And they were all that I talked to were very, very positive. And I said, we're trying hard. And they said, y'all keep going because you're doing good as far as we can tell right now. And we all know how quickly the environment can change too. But I just thought I'd add that to the report that I heard from the guys that are out on it every day, at least in my area. So,
That's great news.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, just a comment. I was a card-carrying member of the St. Lucie River Issues team back in the 90s and we worked forever, Maggie Herchella and others. There was about 30 of us on that original group to rehab the St. Lucie River and to bring back oysters. And my question is, from 10 or 15 years ago to today, are you seeing a better, healthier oyster recruitment than you did 15 years ago?
Yes, definitely. In fact, just to give you a little bit of my history, I used to work at FWI, the same team that does the monitoring for us too. So yep. I ran that program. And we started monitoring the St. Lucie in 2005. And we were seeing storm events that brought so much fresh water into the estuary that we were seeing oyster die-offs almost every 3 years. And I came to the district in 2020, and it hasn't happened since. So I'm not sure if that's because of me or, well, hopefully not me. But Mother Nature has been kinder to us these last 6 years. We haven't had storm events since Irma that have really dumped so much fresh water that overwhelmed the watershed in the system. So that has given oysters in the estuary a chance to have multiple generations instead of just 1 year surviving and then maybe not thriving. So yeah, it's definitely been a better few years for oysters in the estuary.
Well, Drew Bartlett and your governing board of South Florida, to their credit, have embraced water farming, water storage in the basin, and has made a huge difference. Mm-hmm. And just to control our own basin runoff. because traditionally about 400,000 acre feet comes from our own basin. That's a foot of water in Lake Okeechobee. That's a lot of water.
It is a lot of water.
So to be able to control a part of that is so important. So kudos to South Florida and to Drew and that governing board for doing what they're doing, because it's so important to the Indian River Lagoon.
Thanks.
Any further questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now move on to Dr. Rain's presentation on new decision support, information and tools for water quality conservation and restoration.
Oh, do I have it? Great, thank you very much for inviting me here to talk about decision support tools for water quality conservation and restoration. My name is Kai Rains, and I'm a research associate professor at the School of Geosciences at the University of South Florida, where I co-direct the ecohydrology research group with Dr. Mark Rains. We have 8 graduate students, postdoc, a couple undergraduate students, all of whom have in some way helped with the work that I'm going to be presenting today. Out of this work has come a couple publications and an online tool. The QR codes for those resources appear on the slides as I go along. So I want to start by talking about how Florida is under immense land use pressure. Since the 1850s, when Florida achieved statehood, to the 1950s, that pace was, relatively okay, 75 people per day net increase on average, but it really took off mid-20th century, and we have been looking at a net increase of 750 people per day. With that increase in population has come some significant changes in land use and land cover. Back in the day, quite a bit of peninsular Florida would have looked like this, vast, extensive wetland systems, very few, if any, channels. However, this is a landscape that we're all much more familiar with, extensive channelization and many fewer wetlands. I'm going to pause and remind you why I'm talking about wetlands. Of course, they perform a lot of natural functions. They're the habitat functions. They're home for plants, for animals. Temperature modulation, you walk next to one in the summer, it's going to be cooler, it's going to be warmer in the winter. There's also a lot going on below the surface of a wetland that affects water quality. You've got water that has slowed down, and so it has time to infiltrate the soil, replenish the aquifers, keep seawater infiltration bay. You also have the saturated soils, which provide the ideal biogeochemical climate, for getting rid of excess nitrogen from the water column and moving it back up into the atmosphere. So about a while back, probably 2009, we got involved in a small wetlands project with St. Lucie County, the Environmental Resources Department there. And that gave us the opportunity to start to get to know this region. And as we did so, we became more and more interested in the historical change that has happened to the hydrology here, both in terms of changes to wetland extent and distribution, and then also in changes in hydrologic connectivity that has occurred excuse me, as a result of the increased channelization, where we are increasing the connections between existing water bodies. So ultimately, we were interested in gaining insight into this because we saw the potential for it to enhance conservation and restoration opportunities. But first, we needed to do some mapping and learn about the change that had occurred. So we initially set our baseline back in the 1850s, which is about when Florida achieved statehood, also when there was a national interest in surveying the nation's lands. And surveyors would set out on strict compass bearings, and they would lay a chain, which is that metal thing in the picture there, that was 66 feet long behind them to mark distance as they went, and then they would note the features that they observed along the way. This was a big effort in St. Lucie County, which was our initial study area, there were 6 lead surveyors over more than 16 years that it took just to perform this survey. So we acquired the reproductions of the 18 maps that it took to cover mainland St. Lucie County, and that inset is a close-up version of one of those maps. You can see the level of detail there. The lines that make up the checkerboard pattern are the actual lines that the surveyors would walk in order to make these maps. We poured over the surveyor notes, the surveyor drawings, and made a map of the distribution of wetlands and the extent of channels according to these surveyors in the 1850s. We also, we were interested in looking at the change, and so we looked at the wetlands and the channels, not only in the 1850s, but also in the 1950s, which, remember, that's when the population really starts to skyrocket. So this new image here is an early draft of one of our mosaics of over 200 aerial photos of St. Lucie County in the 1950s, black and white, because that's what they had back then. And then for current conditions, we relied on standard land use, land cover mapping products from the water management districts. With these, we were able to look at change through time. So what you see before you here is a map of mainland St. Lucie County. The barrier islands are outlined, but they weren't included in our initial study area. The green is the extent of the wetlands back in the 1850s. Next map that I'm going to show you is the extent, the same extent, same symbology, but what the conditions are today. And we've got many fewer wetlands. If you quantify it by wetland area, which is on the y-axis, you can see that decline over time with wetland loss decreasing, or wetland loss being around 85% from the 1850s to the 2020s. And we did the same sort of mapping when it came to the channels themselves. In this case, the green squiggly lines represent the channels according to those early surveyors. I'm now going to overlay what we're looking at today. Many more channels, and of course those areas that look like lakes are not really lakes. It's just that at this scale you can't distinguish the channels from each other. You can quantify this, or we did quantify this, by measuring the kilometer of channel length and then dividing by the square kilometer of area that you're looking at to get the drainage density. So the drainage density is here on the y-axis. On the x-axis are 4 different time periods. The drainage density in the 1850s is just too small to even register on this, but you can see that it has increased significantly over time. So now I'm going to show you 2 images side by side. We've got the 1850s wetland extent, the 2020 wetland extent. I'm going to overlay the channelization so we can see how they are related to each other, and step back and imagine the typical pathway of water. So back in the 1850s, rain falling out of the sky would have been very likely to land into a wetland. St. Lucie County is flat, and there used to be few channels. That water would process in place. It would infiltrate into the soil or evapotranspirate up into the atmosphere. Today, however, we're looking at a situation in which water that falls from the sky is much less likely to fall into a wetland. Instead, it's going to fall on a modified landscape where it's going to pick up pollutants, be shunted into a channel, most likely, without ever having the opportunity to pass through a wetland, and then off it goes on its journey. So if somebody would have shown me just these images, and I had no idea where I was in the world, and they would have asked me, hey, given this kind of change, would you have any concern for the water quality in the down gradient receiving water body, which in our case, of course, is the Indian River? The answer would be yeah, I'd be a bit concerned. So there's a lot of motivation to both conserve and restore those natural features on our landscape, which provide water quality related functions and services, such as wetlands. But of course, we can't go all the way back. We've got people, we've got infrastructure, we can't. So we became interested in trying to use some of these insights to help with the prioritization of projects, where projects should be situated, how this could help. So that led us to develop the Conservation and Restoration Screening Tool, which we call CRUST, which incorporates the maps of wetland loss from mid-century. I'm no longer going to be making reference to the 1850s. That was just the beginning of this project. And channel density into an interactive tool to screen for sites for wetland conservation and restoration and other hydrologic projects, or honestly, people who have used this tool sometimes just use it to gain insight into their own possible project areas, just to contrast them to each other. This tool was funded by the EPA through a wetland program development grant. We worked in close collaboration with stakeholders as we developed the tool, most notably St. Lucie County Environmental Resources Department. It is freely available to the public on the State of Florida FGIO website. You navigate to the Initiatives tab, go to the bird there, get into CREST, and off you go. I also want to give a plug to the thumbnail right next to it, LandLoad, which is the Landscape Assessment of Nutrient Loading to Water Bodies, which is a prioritization tool for septic to sewer conversion, which our group has also developed, but I don't have time to go into today. So when you open CREST, this is what you see. There's a grid of cells, which are 1 kilometer square, overlaid over our initial study area, which was St. Lucie County. And to the left are a series of 8 filters, which I'm going to be exploring in detail. I want to draw your attention to the data definitions button, which will not be visible on the next slide, but which I'm going to make reference to. And the filters do include the wetland lake and loss information and the channel density. As the user makes selections within the filters, the grid cells will disappear that no longer fit the query. So in the next couple slides, you're going to see just the dynamics of that. I'm going to show you 2 examples, one in which you can screen for conservation sites over the landscape, another in which you can search for restoration sites. In the conservation sites, I'm going to be asking the tool to show me locations that contain wetlands and where there's been some wetland loss. I want to conserve them, so I want wetlands that are in pretty good shape. So I'm going to ask it where there have been few impacts to the existing landscape, few impacts to the existing wetlands. I'd like these to be new conservation areas, so I want them to be outside existing conservation lands. And in this particular example, I'm interested in lands that are otherwise going to be developed in the near future, so I can grab those quickly. As I start off, I open up the wetland lake and presence filter, which you see already open there before you, and I get 5 options. Our options are all based on the concept of quintiles. So for example, if I was to select most, then I would expect that the 20% of the total grid cells that contain the most wetland area would be the only ones remaining then in my query, and then I would continue on. In this case, however, I'm interested in things that contain wetlands, and so I've decided to choose 3 of them, the medium, more, and the most. If I want to know quantitatively, like what are the numerical ranges of those, I just go to that data definitions button that was visible in the previous slide, but not this one, but all that information is available. After I make selections in all of those filters that have a star, which are the ones that are relevant to the query conditions, I only have a handful of sites left, and I can zoom into them because this is all on a ArcGIS online, take a look at what my options might be. And so this is an example of what might pop up. It's the results are fully exportable in a variety of formats. So I could now take this and I could overlay parcel boundary maps or whatever else is relevant to the actual project that I'm doing that might not be represented in these filters themselves. That started right away. In this next, I wonder if there's a way I can pause that. Chaotic. Okay. So in this next example, I'm screening for restoration sites, And as opposed to conservation sites, I'm going to leave most of the filters the same, except for the ones in bold. In this case, I'm looking for restoration sites, so I want wetlands that have suffered, that have had some sort of impact. Often restoration projects involved changes to channelization, so I'm going to look for those with medium to high channel density. So you can see it was animated, and you can watch the user or kind of make selections, and the grid cells come and go. So as you make those queries, you can actually watch it dynamically occur. And then we're going to zoom in. I'm almost to the end here in this one. So we're going to zoom in on 2 options again at the very end. And you'll see that we have more highly impacted wetlands themselves. We've got the channels, but still possible candidates for restoration. All right, these were back up in case the video didn't work. All right, so I've been talking about St. Lucie County a lot. However, we do have, sorry. The professor in me, I feel like I should walk around. We have an expanded study area. Now we've been funded by DEP to explore kind of this concept in the Indian River Lagoon watershed. We have been working on phase 1, which is the historical mapping. So the 1940s to current day conditions. Where have we lost the natural capital necessary to perform these inland water quality functions? Now, when we did the mapping in St. Lucie County, it took us a very long time. We were doing it hand digitizing, off the photos, and that's just not possible in a study area of this size. So instead, we've been exploring the use of AI and machine learning to automate mapping from 3 different sources. I'm going to go into the first 2 of those sources today and show you some examples. So the first one was the USGS topographic maps. Historical topo maps are freely available on the USGS topo map, on the USGS website. You just navigate on in there, you choose your location. In this case, I've chosen Sebastian. You're provided a variety of historical map options. I'm going to choose 1949. And there's Sebastian in 1949. And you can make out that there's a variety of symbology there, and there's a wealth of information on an old topo map. There's different symbols for mangroves than there are for freshwater wetlands, different ones for intermittent lakes than there are for perennial lakes, churches, buildings, all kinds of stuff. But it's not really usable to us in this form. Like we need to be able to take the extent of, say, the mangroves and extract them from that map so that we can compare them to other things. So we could do that by hand digitizing each one of those mangrove polygons. But again, it would take a long time, or we could teach a machine how to do it. So that's the approach we've taken. This is a close-up of one of those maps. The green dots in the middle are orchards, and the blue polygons are some intermittent lakes. And the pink is the result after we taught the machine to recognize where the intermittent map symbology was, where the intermittent lake symbology was on this map. So pretty good job. Now that we have those symbols, we can overlay them on other products. And so here it is overlaid on the 1940s image from that same time period. You can see that, the mappers themselves didn't map every single wetland back in the 40s. And there's some more detail there that we might be able to grab if only we could teach the machine how to extract that information directly from the aerial photo. So that's what we did next. In this case, the results from the machine are in green rather than pink. You can see the underlying photo being revealed as the green disappears. And those darker areas are areas that are wetter. So it's picking those up quite nicely. I'm showing you a place where it worked quite well. This is a work in progress. There are some other places where we're kind of still, working out the details. This project hasn't ended yet. Nevertheless, I'm going to show you the draft results for Indian River County. So this is the intersection of our study area, Indian River County. When we compared it to current day distribution of wetlands, we see there's a 64% loss in wetland lake area. That number will undoubtedly change as we refine our final results. However, I wanted to present it to you today, kind of to stress the fact that this loss in natural capital is not something unique to St. Lucie County, but rather we're seeing it to the north as well. And as we extend our study throughout the study area, we expect to continue finding these sorts of the scale of loss. Let's see. So this is my final slide. Getting out there and actually seeing the landscape is essential for proper mapping. It's impossible for us because we're mapping something from the 1940s and it's not the 1940s anymore. We've been, over the last couple of days, my graduate students and I have been exploring the conservation areas as an idea of, okay, those are areas that probably haven't changed a whole bunch, but we can tell that even there's been substantial change. So if you know somebody who would like to talk to us about conditions in this study area, maybe they had a big ranch or something, and somebody who would offer some historical perspective, please, if you would give them my contact information, we'd love to talk to them. The other thing is that our current funding does not include actual development of CREST. It just runs through that historical mapping. So we are currently exploring funding alternatives. And we have been also trying to gauge the level of interest because things like letters of support are extremely important for continuing this project when we do go to look for more funding. When we do, if we are successful, there's going to be an opportunity to be able to improve CREST. For example, one of my graduate students, Drubo, is very interested in incorporating a sea level rise or flooding component into the tool as well. And this is a picture of a few of the students who are have been instrumental in this process. We've got Drubo in the foreground here. He's with us today. He was the topo map. The brains behind the topo map, automated mapping. Bethany is also with us. She's in the back in this photo, and she did the contemporary mapping, which is great work. I just didn't have time to tell you about it. Jamil in the very back there is the brains behind the automated mapping off the aerial imagery, and both he and Mark Rains would have loved to have been here today, but Mark is giving him delivering his posthumous degree to him, or to a representative from the Bangladeshi consulate today. And that's everything.
Questions?
Okay. Oh.
How can I get to those slides you just showed? Are they available? Okay. Thank you.
And you're welcome to them. And the 1850s work was published as a standalone publication, and then the 1950s and the contrast and the implications is another publication, and they're on those QR codes.
Okay.
And also the study area that you did for St. Lucie County, how far west did you go of the Indian River Lagoon?
How far west? We did the whole county border because we were,
Okay.
Our focus at the time was county level management, not necessarily restricted to the Indian.
Okay, I just wondered if you just mapped the urban areas or if you went into western St. Lucie County.
That is the full mainland county, yeah.
Thanks. Any further questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, excellent.
Next up is
Excellent.
a report from Terry Breeden from Brevard County.
Yep. Good morning. I'm Terry Breeden with the Brevard County Save Our Indian River Lagoon program. I'm going to do a report on the management board meeting that we had on Tuesday. The meeting started on time. There were no revisions to the agenda, and the minutes were approved unanimously. Stu Glass submitted, and the board approved the Finance Subcommittee report. Lauren Hall presented on the St. John's River Water Management District water quality information, and Dr. Melanie Parker for the South Florida Water Management District. We also saw the presentation that Dr. Kai Rains just gave. And under new business, we had 6 items presented. The first was our small grants, and we had a unanimous motion to recommend the ranking of the 21 applications and to fund the projects ranked 1 through 8, with funding for number 8 to come from reserves. And then 2 members recused themselves from voting due to potential conflicts of interest. Item B was the Independent Audit Services RFP, and the Management Board unanimously recommends to accept the final ranked list and for staff to negotiate a contract with the top-ranked firm. Item C was the fiscal year 2027 final budget, and again, the Management Board unanimously recommends to approve. Item D was a presentation by Virginia Barker from the Save Our Lagoon program and Brevard County Natural Resources. She was discussing the funding opportunities, SORL funding opportunities, and Brevard County priorities. There was no motion on this. It was just more of a discussion about the project types, the Citizen Oversight Committee, and potential growth in the county. Item E was priorities and structure of the RFPs for the grants. There was no motion made on this, but the Management Board suggests potentially adding language to the RFP that if an applicant is submitting more than one proposal, that the second and third or fourth proposals have a co-PI listed on there, and then potentially allocating time in the budget section for those PIs. The second part of this item included a discussion on if the categories needed to be changed. There was a lot of discussion, and Daniel and KJ helped provide some background information as to why this came up. And ultimately, the Management Board suggested option 3, which was no changes to the categories, but to refine the criteria for science and innovation proposals to be more directed and focused on CCMP goals. We also discussed if conservation easements should be required for projects that are on private property. There was discussion and a few examples were heard. For example, septic to sewer projects on a personal private property versus a habitat restoration project potentially in a homeowners association, where we suggest waiting for a legal opinion, and these could potentially be looked at on a case-by-case basis. And then item F was the independent audit report for fiscal year 2025, and we made a unanimous motion to accept the audit report. And lastly, we heard the staff reports.
Thank you.
All right.
Questions? Thanks.
All right, you're welcome.
Next up, a report from Dr. Chuck Jacoby.
Morning, Chuck Jacoby with the Florida Flood Hub, the chair of the Science, Technology, Engineering, and Modeling Advisory Committee. And the key points from our meeting were we had a consent agenda that involved approving the minutes of our February meeting, recommending to you the fiscal year 2027 budget, and also recommending to you the independent audit report for fiscal year 2025. We heard about water quality, the decision support tool that you just heard about, had no old business. Then we went into recommending to you accepting the ranking of the small grants and funding the top 8 using the allocated funds and money from the interest on the bank accounts. We also recommend accepting the ranking of the audit firms and negotiating with the top firm, Carr, Riggs & Ingram. We heard about the Save Our Indian River Lagoon program, and again, although there was no real motion or a vote on something, there was unanimous support for doing whatever it took to keep this program rolling. We discussed the request for proposals in some detail. which included talking about the decision about whether to limit primary investigator, principal investigators to one proposal, and the pros and cons involved in that in terms of getting the best proposal, spreading the love, as it were, and involving more individuals, trying to track responsibly the allocation of time with things such as having PIs put in current and pending, so a list of their current and pending proposals and their time allocations, tracking time as the project goes on. Generally speaking, we ended up on saying that probably the concept would be to limit a principal investigator to one proposal per category. So kind of put the onus on them to choose what's their best foot to put forward. We also talked about funding work on private property. Again, there's a lot of privately owned shoreline and so forth along the lagoon, and it may come to the point where when you're looking to restore areas, that's what's kind of left to deal with. Conservation easements was certainly discussed. The concept of, is there a way to claw back the funding if the conservation easement principle goes south for some reason, the homeowners association changes their mind, et cetera. Also considering mechanisms to fund maintenance and monitoring of these situations. Some sort of tax break or something like that was put forward. And then there was a discussion about, well, what exactly is some of this restoration really on about? Yes, what we would ultimately hope is that, that the things that are restored prosper, but there's also kind of a stewardship education aspect to some of this. And so again, that may factor into just, having this information and this effort be out there. So again, there wasn't what I would call a really firm conclusion, although people generally agreed that if you're doing something on private property, an easement was certainly something to pursue. We discussed the structure and functioning of the request for proposals that goes out each year. In terms of maintaining the breadth of what we're trying to accomplish here, as well as trying to focus in so that your progress adds up over time. It's eventually voted for keeping the 5 categories that are currently there. So water quality, habitat restoration, that's the larger turn dirt projects, community-based restoration, which again is a little more focused on this concept of education and stewardship. The science and innovation, but this time, as was mentioned, have a little bit more direction perhaps on a goal or a limited number of goals that relate to the CCMP, and then the small grants program. We heard the staff reports and we adjourned just slightly after 4:30.
Questions? Thank you, sir. Next is Citizens Advisory Committee, Captain Frank Catino. Hello, Captain.
It's me again. Good morning. Citizens Advisory Committee met not last Thursday, but the Thursday prior, so that they could review the rankings for the small grants program and have those available for the meetings that happen this week on Tuesday. So they did that. We had 21 proposals. 13 of our CAC members reviewed every single one of those proposals and ranked them and presented the list for everybody to look at. They eventually recommended approving the rankings and funding the top proposals all the way down to number 8, which would require taking money out of reserves for that. They also recommended approval for independent audit services RFP and retaining Carr, Riggs, and Ingram. They recommended you approve the final budget. And then in the discussion, they did not get the discussion about the SORO program, but what they did get was the discussion about RFPs and the structure of RFPs for the future. They had no objections to having more than one proposal from a PI. So that was not an issue for them. They did recommend regarding public monies on private land that landowners, particularly HOAs, collaborate with local governments or with nonprofits to submit the proposal where there might be a little more expertise. So that was one thing they recommended. And then they favored option 3, which was to keep the categories and to have a directed RFP for science. Let's see. They also recommended approval for the independent audit report. And we adjourned on time. That's it.
Questions? Thanks.
Thanks.
Next up is the consent agenda. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve. Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any objections? That motion passes unanimously. There is no old business. We'll take up new business. The first is the independent audit report for fiscal year 2025. Good morning.
Good morning. So we finished up our fiscal year 2025 audit. It was overall an uneventful audit and went very well. I'm going to first introduce Christine Olron from Carr, Riggs & Ingram to kind of give you the financial highlights, and then I can come back up and discuss our one single finding. So as part of the findings in doing single audits, they have to review and make sure that we cleared all our last year's audits. One thing I learned from this current year is that financial or federal rules and regulations for single audits are not the same between federal agencies. So we got our hands wrapped around what was going on in EPA. However, there's little nuances with some of these rules with NOAA. And so we'll talk about that at the end. But Christine can come up and give you the financial highlights.
Good morning. As Daniel mentioned, I'm the partner who oversaw your financial statement audit for this past year. So you did get a clean, unmodified opinion, which is the opinion that you want to receive on your financial statements. In your general fund, which is your main operating fund, you had an increase in your revenues overall of $2 million and an increase in your expenses of $1 million. This was due to the NOAA grant that you received. So you received the funds by spending the funds, so you have an increase in both your revenues and your expenses. You have a positive increase in your fund balance of $500,000. So this was a positive increase to your bottom line compared to last year. You had a use of your fund balance of $737,000. So your due from other governments on your balance sheet, just to compare, it increased $1 million. Again, your NOAA grant caused most of your activity this year. So at the end of the year, you had not received all of the funds that you had earned, so you had $1 million receivable from them. And then your accounts payable also increased because you needed the funds from NOAA in order to pay all of your invoice payments. So that went up $600,000. From a budget standpoint, your revenues and expenditures, you were under on your revenues and under on what you had projected for your expenditures because you budgeted the entire NOAA grant. You had lots of small projects. First time you've done it, didn't know how fast all of the programs would progress. So this way you just budgeted all of it so you don't have to run the risk of violating Florida statute and being over budget. So you were fine. Everything else was very much in line with what you had budgeted. For the findings, last year we had 2 audit findings. Both those were cleared this year. So management worked very diligently to make sure that the grant reporting from the National Actuary Program and your suspension and debarment findings were cleared this year. We also did not have any financial statement findings. So over the financial statements themselves, all of those were done fine. The NOAA grant one, Daniel mentioned briefly, it wasn't even written in your NOAA grant agreement. But there's a federal regulation that if you are the first recipient from the federal government and you provide subawards, that you have to report it now on sam.gov. So Daniel has now gone back and entered all of those in. The grantor didn't even care that you hadn't done the reports. They're not looking at them, but there is a federal regulation that they just should be filed. So those reports are now uploaded and it's been corrected in 2026. They just weren't filed in 2025. In terms of audit adjustments, we had one adjustment to remove a receivable. So as you're billing for your memberships, they put in the receivable so they keep track of what they billed. This one was for the next fiscal year, so it was billed right before your year ended. So we just removed that receivable since it related to FY26. And then management chooses to pass on recording your leases. You have the lease for the office space, which the asset's worth about $20,000, but you have to do a annoying and onerous complication of calculating the present value of all the future payments of the lease to then record inflows and outflows of non-cash items. And it also adds a whole bunch of footnotes for an office lease. So they pass on recording it that way and just record the expenses, they're paying it.
Questions?
Okay.
Want to add anything, Dan?
I'll just add on that one finding that Christine mentioned. She's mentioned that it's not a term and condition, like a specific term and condition on our award. EPA, on the other hand, does have it a specific term and condition. However, for FATO, or the Federal Financial Accounting Transparency Act, you have to meet certain criteria, and several federal agencies do it differently. Some say you have to meet these 3 requirements, like EPA does, and one of them is, do you have $25 million in grants from the federal government? We do not, so we don't have to report that. NOAA, however, did not have it as a specific term and condition. It was a general term and condition for the Department of Commerce, so it was buried. But like as we said, we've already corrected that issue, and so we're good going forward.
I'm sure we're all familiar with audits. We do them in our counties, we do them in our committees, and these are the weirdest and most nitpicky audits I've seen anywhere.
Federal
Good
single
job.
audits are intense. Thank you.
Is there a motion to accept the audit?
So moved.
Second. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Next up is small grants. Dan.
My notes give you a little background on some more of these projects. So as Kathy mentioned in the CAC meeting that happened this past Thursday, last week, we had all of our committee members going through the rank list. And so again, there was a heavy lift, and really proud of the CAC to have 13 out of 19 look at all 21 to really get a good representation of all those projects. Here's all the rankings, and so this first page is 1 through 7, and I'll kind of give you just a little background on each project. All these are within the funding allocation, so as you can see in the very far bottom left, that's how much money would be left based on the initial $25,000 allocation. So we fund all these projects all the way to the end, there's $107.32 left. The first top-ranked project is the Martin Oyster Initiative. This is a kind of like a shuck and share recycling shell program by a nonprofit in that area that is using local students from South Fork High School for use in projects within St. Lucie and Martin County. So there's a gap. There's no real shell recycling down there, and so they're going to help fill that gap. The second ranked project is Living Drains from Vero Beach High School. So these are high school students, and they're trying to test like a 2 to 3 linear foot kind of living shoreline buffer, native vegetation around storm drains to kind of capture some of that grass clippings and other pollutants. And so it's a little pilot project for some high school students. Third project is Lagoon Quest. This has been a project we've funded for several years now. It's for Brevard County students participating in conservation, education, field trip-based study trips to the IRL to increase their connections, to the lagoon. The third project, I'm sorry. Actually, I skipped one. This is my list here. I didn't know their order. MRC, that is a citizen science water quality monitoring called Lagoon Watch. And this year they are going to reintroduce dissolved oxygen monitoring with their volunteers. The fourth ranked project is Little Growers. This is a 6-week program for 15 youth in immersive field trips to the lagoon. I just did Lagoon Quest. 6 is UCF. This is to create an educational program for developing learning for high school students to kind of learn about an understudied type of pollution, which is atmospheric deposition of microplastics. And then 7 is the Manatee Center down in Fort Pierce. They're going to do a community-based oyster farming workshops to help the public create these oyster gardens that they can put on their docks, private docks, have some oyster farming throughout St. Lucie County. And then I'm going to go to the next ranked part. All these on this slide are considered eligible, so they are above that funding threshold of 75%. But you can see to fully fund through that, we'd have to add an additional $26,000. There was really strong support from the CAC on Project 8. They said, there's only $100 left, but we really find it a very valuable project. This project would be a 3-day youth workshops and education looking at phytoplankton monitoring so that they can look at food web interactions. And that's for 20 to 25 students in historic underrepresented and communities. And so they ranked that one. They asked me, do we have enough funding for that? I said, we do have soft money from our soft revenue from our bank account, over close to $100,000 a year, so we could fund this project no problem. So they made that recommendation. Going just in one more, these projects are all ineligible based on the criteria of the RFP, so just showing you how they fell out, but they are not eligible for any consideration by the board. I'll take any questions.
I see that there's a vast discrepancy on match share. How much is that weighted?
It is not at all, since there is no match requirement in small grants. We track it though because we feel the review team, those reviewers may look at that as a consideration, but in the actual scoring criteria, there is none. So it's kind of based on, I think, those reviewers' opinion at that point.
Okay. Questions? Yes.
This is a little bit out in left field. I kind of live out in left field anyway, so I feel very comfortable doing this. But Bud Adams, St. Lucie County farmer, and who's passed away, but his family still lives on his 20,000-acre ranch. When he was alive, he offered a very modest prize to any engineering student at the University of Florida to help him move his water around his ranch and provide better water quality and how to do it cheaply. And he invited me to the results, and about 10 of us sat around, and what the students came up with was phenomenal. Bud took most of those ideas and he saved tens of thousands of dollars of diesel fuel costs, and the water quality was much better on his ranch. I don't know if Dwayne was allowed to do this, but to offer a modest prize to any college within the Indian River Lagoon Basin to draw out ideas that we might want to get for a modest prize. But what we got from UF was mind-boggling. And a lot of us engineering guys, I came in from the engineering world, I was blown away by what these 18-year-olds came up with to improve a 20,000-acre ranch water quality and the movement of that water. So just an idea while you were going over this, I thought, I'm all for thinking out of the box to save this Indian River Lagoon, because we have to, because the easy ideas we've done, and the current math is kind of static. I think thinking out of the box of the new generation just might open up a door that we never thought of. So anyway. Yeah.
I'll add two things to that, and I'm sure Dwayne and I bet we're thinking the same thing here. Back in like 2018, we had an event called Hack the IRL,
right.
And you probably remember that.
Yeah.
And that was looking at some startup companies and students and all these, and trying to figure out ways to improve water quality. And it was like a 36-hour or 24-hour event.
It was a 36-hour hackathon. And I like to brag, the first ever hack of an estuary in North America. We teamed up with the Space Coast Economic Development Commission, and we've got a Brevard County. It's run by nonprofit philanthropists who felt like we needed an accelerator in Melbourne, and ran that 36-hour event. And interesting enough, I mean, all those projects were amazing. The winner, the team, actually had an offer from a private developer. It was like a smart, Bluetoothed, water quality, 3D printed, basically box, less than $1,000, They did all the software, they did all the, coatings, so you could sit in your house and see what the water quality, and it was really amazing. This developer said, I'll have you guys, it was a team of, I think, 3 or 4 young students, and I'll pay you to put these out on my development. And they went, yeah, we do this for fun, and for the perks of a hack. So they got skateboards, they got, all sorts of cool stuff. But, going into business, and the folks at Groundswell, we're going, oh my gosh, they just got a job offer from a 36-hour event and they passed on it. So the answer to your question is yes. If you would like us, because when we get through this agenda, between now and August, we'll be tweaking the RFPs. If you would like us to, we could do this, I'm looking to Kathy, because there's work to this, but we could separate a category that's directed by us that may not be competitive for a single entity, but a group like a hack, and then go find some partners and open it back up. I was there for probably 24 hours. They were all working 36 hours. People were bringing in coffee, food, and a lot of sweet stuff to keep the kids awake, but the projects were all amazing. And the dialogue was amazing. And then we judged who won.
Right.
And so if that should be the interest of the council moving forward, I, for one, am all for that kind of innovation at that, young student to almost graduating. Some of the ideas were phenomenal. And by the way, I can give you a link. A lot of that is still online to see where the different teams went. Some were educational, some were water quality, but all very innovative.
I think it's no time like the present. The Lagoon is suffering. We can use every input and every new thought that we can generate. I'm all for it.
You need a motion? We can provide one.
Well, I think motion, but just one other point before you make that motion. This doesn't have to be super expensive on the financial side.
Right.
Because mainly, there's 2 different, what I would call, channels for innovation. You've got the student channel, which could be, and we saw this at Harbor Branch this year. One of the winning, presentations was a high school student who actually has patents pending on the work she did. And so, we can leave that open, and then how you layer out the awards could be a combination of a small cash or 3 small cash. We actually provide awards for the calendar they're very minor, but it's one of the reasons we get such good photographs. So my suggestion, if you give staff this direction, I'm looking at Kathy and my staff. Any of you freaking out at all about? Everybody's smiling. So what we'll do is we'll craft it, see if we can get a couple partners. And then when we come back with our RFPs on the big categories, we'll embed that into that, where do we go next with our budget? Because it's not going to be a huge amount of money, but there'll be a fair amount of work organizing this. But the outcomes are always really cool.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, then we can move back to the 11B. So the one recommendation calls for approving 1 through 7. Another calls for approving 1 through 8. What's the council's pleasure?
Motion to do 1 through 8.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
One other minor point. Don't we need board approval for the whole 21?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're just going to approve the ranking from top to bottom.
Okay.
Motion to approve the ranking from 1 to 21.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes unanimously. And on to the Independent Audit Services RFP.
All right, so as part of our independent audit services contract, we have to put that out every 5 years for RFP. The RFP is structured based on Florida statutes requirements, and one of those requirements is to have a review committee, and the review committee has to have one member from this board, governing board here. And so we had all the reviewers review all the received proposals independently of each other. They did not know who they were. They scored them. Then they all met afterwards, and we looked at the rankings and solidified those in a committee meeting. And so here's how they ranked out. We had 3 respondents. Our current auditors, Carr, Riggs, and Ingram. Grau & Associates was second, and Moss, Krusik & Associates came in third. And so I looked at a couple of different ways to look at the scores. One was just straight average of all the reviewers. You can see how they are presented there. Then I took out the high score and the low score, normalized it. There were no changes in either of those. There was still 1, 2, 3 across all of them. And then again, after the committee met, they decided to solidify those results, and you can see them as 1, 2, 3. So the recommendation from the review committee to you all is to approve a 5-year contract with the top-ranked firm, which is Carr, Riggs, and Ingram, and we will be working with them for another 5 years.
Questions? Is there a motion to accept staff's recommendation?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion passes unanimously. And next up is a review and adoption of the final budget for FY 2027.
Yeah, so this budget, when we looked at our tentative budget back in February, per Florida statutes, we have to have a final budget in before June 1st. There was only a couple of changes from the tentative budget passed in February to this final budget, and I'll kind of just highlight those 2 changes here. You can see there's a $10,000 decrease in our other expenditures category roll-up. This is mostly a true-up of all the RFPs that we're seeing back in February, as well as pulling just under $10,000 out of our unencumbered revenue, so revenue that we expect to get that hasn't been assigned to a specific line item, and moved it over to facilities expenses, and that is in our communications and equipment. So we're due for some new computers for staff, and so just putting that in the budget there for anybody that may need it next year. And that's it. No other changes from the tentative budget.
Questions about the budget? Is there a motion to review and accept the proposal for the FY 27 final budget?
Motion to review and accept.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion passes unanimously. And priorities and structure of the RFPs for water quality habitat restoration, community-based habitat restoration, and science and innovation.
So I'm going to we've kind of almost answered this question, with the reports from the advisory committees, but I want to go through where we, preset this discussion. Back in our February meetings, some of the issues that came up, do we fund projects on private property? Do we allow a primary applicant or principal investigator to have, 2 awards in the same category, which was the first time ever. And so before we opened this up, and we did not kind of guide this discussion, either in the STEM AC or the management board, but I didn't want them to go into that discussion without understanding the uncertainties of moving forward. And there's quite a few financial uncertainties, so we, our Section 320, I think we're very comfortable for this year coming up, but as we move into the next fiscal year, new Congress, we're still in appropriations review. So we're budgeting, with the anticipation we're not going to have any loss of fundings. It was also really important because one of the kind of determined conversations was, why don't we cut out habitat restoration, since we had a $9.4 million NOAA grant to support habitat restoration, and we still have 1 more year in that grant. Should we put any more money into that category because we didn't have any applications this last round. And so we didn't have, unanimous consensus, but there was pretty, I would say a majority consensus when I show you the options we provided. None of us know what the state budget's going to look like. We're still waiting for a budget. And I just didn't want our advisory committees not to realize that when we start to change our policy and procedures as it relates to requests for funding proposals, and we've always had categories that had set targets, with the most money in water quality, second most money. I didn't want their discussion to be about money because we don't know. And we can have that discussion when we're a little clearer on budgets in August. But we did want this information now, so we have from now until August to preset all of the nuances of the discussion. And then, Florida legislative priority changes are also in play right at the moment. And of course, property taxes is one of the big ones, and we're all looking at those carefully. So with that knowledge, we opened it up. Next slide. Do we have a next slide? Oh, I'm going to let you do it. I can do it if you want. I didn't touch them. There. I'll let you do this. I'm too old for the technology. So we gave them options based on what we heard back in February, which basically set up. There should be another slide, Kathy. Is there? So here we go. So the previous discussions, which you heard from the reports, was limit an individual PI to, a single application per category. There wasn't a lot of controversy with that. The idea was, the downside is, you have PIs who do really good proposals. This last year, we had a PI who had the top two and took most of the funding. This is just going to push. If a single principal investigator or applicant has two really good ideas, then they're going to need to find a co-PI to become the applicant for that project. So it's going to kind of almost organically force some partnerships. Not a lot of tension about that, and I don't think it's a bad change, and staff did not preset any of this. And the conservation easement issue, the first thing I wanted to do, and I knew the answer to this, but I did not want to be the author of the answer to this. Is it allowable and legal for the council to use taxpayer dollars, public funds, on private property improvements? So I looked to Glenn for an opinion on the legality. And one of the concerns, I think, from top to bottom was not so much the legal aspects, but the perception aspects. And where we are, and we'll bring the language forward, is to put some requirements on those types of proposals, one of which, through our conversations, has been, if I'm an HOA or a condo association or even a private homeowner, that private landowner cannot be the principal applicant. They need to have either a nonprofit organization or a government entity be the applicant. So we've teamed up a private-public partnership. And one of the considerations was because these dollars, might be federal, might be state, might be council. A lot of these associations don't have the wherewithal to do the kind of paperwork and compliance on what we require for grants. So our plan for these two is to just tweak the language, make sure that private partnerships can happen. And the Save Our Indian River Lagoon program is doing that all the time with septic to sewer. We've done similar projects on private lands, but it's always been in partnership with either DEP or the Water Management District. So we'll tweak that language, and there's a lot of options for us as staff to consider. So I'm going to ask kind of where you want to land on this. and we'll have another discussion, but there was issues about, who manages the property and monitors it? Do you need a management plan? Is a conservation easement in perpetuity really in perpetuity? And we know the answer to that is if you have really good attorneys, 20 years down the line, conservation easements, we've seen them turned over. How far do you want to go with our limited amount of funds? Because we don't have a ton of funding. So is there any strong opinions? Because we'll kind of look at this, we'll look at some examples, see if we can't tighten it down so it doesn't exempt or it won't be a barrier to doing work on private lands, but it's going to have another level of oversight, to make sure that we're doing the right thing for the right reason with numeric. And the one we had last year was a shoreline, but we had no numeric benefits other than, having volunteers, and the HOA was partnering. So we've got to think through the details, but we want to get your opinion just in general to guide us as we tweak this.
Any strong opinions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Glenn, what do you say about this? Because I can tell you what our county's saying, because we go through it with beach renourishment, we're going through it with culvert repairs and everything else. What is your thought?
As long as you determine that it's a public benefit, then yes, you can provide funding on private property for a public benefit. So, for example, we spoke about living shorelines. And if you say, okay, we're going to do this project on your living shoreline in front of your house, but in exchange for that, you're going to provide us with a conservation easement, you're going to agree to maintain mangroves if that's what's planted, and you determine that that serves a public benefit. So no different than you often see local governments give tax abatements or tax breaks for a convention center or a hotel, which is certainly private, but the public benefit is always a determination of you all. So you have to determine if it's a public benefit on that particular project.
I just know that like I said, we're going through that right now, and of course, I think all the counties, we have the beach renourishment projects we all do, and that's always a big deal. Trying to get easements for us to be on part of your property to put sand down, and of course, there's been a lot of misconceptions about that, but that's another story. But for some people think it's great. Some people don't want us anywhere near their property, but that's okay. We work around that. We're also and these are only examples I give. We're finding some culverts in canals that are owned by Indian River Farms Water Control District here in Indian River County that were done 50 years or even more ago when it was citrus grove, and the grove owner would put a culvert in a canal that's theirs now is turned into a subdivision or turned into private residence is having to replace those culverts because they're failing. And of course, we have rain events. We have to move the water in the canal system and move it through. And some of these are extraordinarily expensive, and they're wanting the county to chime in, and we just can't do it because it's a private benefit, not a public benefit, and we just can't do it, and we're having to find other alternatives. So it's a pretty big deal. So it is a problem, but I think Glenn said it well. I think if there's a true public benefit to it, and everybody can benefit by it, the community as a whole, not just the private property owner, we can do that would be great. I mean, I think Doug, tell me if I'm wrong. We kind of do it with y'all. Kind of do it. And South Florida does it with water management practices, as long as it's a public benefit, even though sometimes private landowners do benefit by it too. I think it's a thing. I think it's just you have to walk a fine line there, is all.
Madam Chairman, I think it's smart to explore this. I think we need to go down this path. We need to save every square inch of Florida that we can with the mega growth. Just thinking just one part of it, the seawalls of South Florida that along the Lagoon complex from Indian River County south, it's seawalled to death. And if we can with private landowners, work with them as to how to enhance the quality of that. Kind of like what they did off the Palm Beach Par 3 in Palm Beach. It's been seawalled forever. There was nothing there. My father's house was right around the corner from there, and they put in rocks all along the seawall with mangroves on the inside of that, and with the inlets to allow little fish and crabs and everything to proliferate in there. It's been a huge increase to the water quality, but I think it's things like that. We can be aggressive. We can go after where it makes sense. Not every piece of property makes sense, but for the right piece of property or the right size to do the most good to help the Indian River Lagoon, I think we got to consider it. We got to consider, like we are with our science, we got to think out of the box. This lagoon needs help from all sides and for all needs, so I'm all for it.
Yeah, I am too. I think we need to explore all options also. If we didn't allow government to operate on private property, we would never, ever again complete a septic to sewer project.
That's correct.
Never.
Yeah.
We are reliant upon government being allowed to benefit private property owners.
Think of water farming, what we're doing. Private-public partnerships are phenomenal to stop water flowing into the lagoon. And we have to go after this. We got to be smart enough to do it.
And just for the record, in our NOAA grant, we had to move some of the project sites from federal lands where they weren't available when we thought they would to private. And NOAA on their grants require a conservation easement in perpetuity. And we've already enacted one of those in that project boundary. There was a discussion in our meetings last week, well, why would any landowner agree to that? And my answer was, we're going to have some criteria that we'll bring back to you. And if a primary, private owner doesn't want to comply with those requirements, then this money won't be available. So we just need to be very clear in August that we haven't made it so onerous that it doesn't open up the opportunity, or so open where, we go ahead and do work and let's say it's a 500 linear foot shoreline restoration and, 15 days later, the property is assessed at a higher number because of our work and flips in the marketplace. And we'll work with Glenn on language. We'll talk to our partners at state water management districts and kind of see where it fits. And we'll come back with that language.
Any further discussion? Okay, let's move on.
So this should be relatively easy. This is what we provided to our two advisory committees last week and said, we're not going to change small grants at all. However, the small grants committee, the CAC, did say, if we're doing education, that maybe we should think, about, and this would also include the community-based, how do we actually look at net output, the community, social, ecological lift? So, and it may be too much for small grants, we think, but, are you changing behavior? Have you actually looked at the social, educational impacts of that experience? So we're going to tweak that. And then we gave them these, 4 options, including if they wanted to break it open to a brand new view. And in all cases, and you heard this in the reports, the lean heavily was towards option number 3. Don't take any of the categories off the table, because we have no idea what's going to be prioritized by state and federal government moving forward. So leave those open and then tighten down the science and innovation, and we'll work with our partners. We've got our CCMP. We've got all of the 32 vital signs. 6 of them are considered critical. And we have a report, which was kind of funny to me that nobody mentioned, our scientific gaps report that we did just a couple of years ago. And so we will talk to our partners, especially our funding partners in our counties, to see how we can take this from a very large kind of open opportunity and narrow it down to some areas that we all agree that are probably the most specific focuses. And there's no question in my mind that anytime you ask this question, nutrient reduction, water quality, always becomes the first consideration. So I'm thinking that will be the same. And it's going to parallel to what I'll, share with you about, the Save Our Indian River Lagoon program. And so the question on the table is, whether the council, agrees with those recommendations to move forward on option 3. And then we'll tweak all of this language, including the new event. As we had that conversation, I'm thinking that's not a competitive RFP. That's going to be a council, National Estuary Program competitive event where we're going to put the word out that anybody who wants to compete, the winners are going to get whatever we decide. And I'll promise now, I still have a skateboard deck from the original one. It's pretty cool. Haven't put wheels on it because I don't want to kill myself. But, we can put that together, get some sponsors, come back to you in August.
Yeah, option 3, I agree. It looks good. I not a fan of 2 or 4 taking habitat restoration off. Doesn't make sense to me, knowing that that's high hanging fruit. So sometimes the projects that come in are far and few between, but when they do come in, they're highly valuable. So you want the opportunity to have that, because that drives water quality and other factors as well. So 3 looks good to me.
I'm seeing a lot of head nodding.
Yeah.
Need a motion?
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve option 3?
So moved.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thanks.
Thank you.
And now
And we
we'll
go on to
do
staff.
staff reports. Kathy Hill.
All right, I'm going to review our social metrics for last quarter first. So this is the view from Facebook. You can see our top 5 posts there. The number 1 post was that sort of gray one in the first position. That post got 106,000 views with 362 interactions. And that was a post we did just about making people aware of the cold weather, and if they saw fish kills, just report them. So that got a lot of traction. We were happy with that. Overall, Facebook got almost 300,000 views last quarter, 287. It was up 24%, so that was good news for this quarter. Instagram, down a little bit this quarter. You can see the top posts there. This quarter, the top one got almost 4,000 views and 80 interactions. And I'll remind you again that Facebook and Instagram have very different demographics. Facebook has a much older audience. Instagram has a much younger audience. So we are going to try to shake up Instagram a little bit and use more video and more fun stuff. Still on mission, but more fun focused. So trying to capture those younger folks and see if we can get some traction there. So more on that as we develop the ideas for it. But Jesse and KJ are going to take the lead on that as our youngest staff members. All right, highlights. This is from the Northern Lagoon. This is Jesse's territory. Jesse assisted with judging the Tomoka Regional Science Fair and also grabbed some of those students to be presenters at the Shore Symposium, which happened last month. That was a really successful program. Commissioner, I don't know if you were in the room for that, but the room was full at the Brannon Center. Excellent day, full day of science and just all kinds of ecology-focused things. Very, very good day. She also presented to Marine Science Center, the Milwee Middle School STEM Night, and to Titusville Community Conference. So those were both good events. She enjoyed those a lot, and there were a lot of public available there for that. She is doing a lot of monitoring. This is her time of year to be out in the field, so lots of monitoring of seagrasses in Mosquito Lagoon and also living shorelines in Tomoka. For the third quarter, as I said, SHORE has already happened, and ESERT has already happened, the quarterly meeting for ESERT and the OIMMP meetings, and then more field work. In Heather's region, in the Central Lagoon, Heather got the Lagoon Champion Award last month from the Clean Water Coalition of Indian River County. So congratulations to her on that. She did a bunch of presentations last quarter and worked the Lagoon by Brush and Lens event. That was an art event at the Art Museum in Vero. Included a lot of our photographers from the calendar contest. And she did a presentation there for the one of the opening nights for that. She also did the art show and the artist reception and was available for all of that. She did 3 presentations for us at Space Coast Birding and Wildlife Festival, and that was really well attended. She organized our Envirothon event this year again, really successful. We had almost 90 students and 60 volunteers that happened, and we sent 3 teams to the state event. And she co-taught with the Indian River County IFAS folks the Florida Master Naturalist Uplands module. So they had a pretty good sized class and did 40 hours of classroom work and field work. For quarter 3, she did 7 Earth Day events, so she was very busy around Earth Day with 3 presentations, 2 festivals, and she was on a panel and a forum, all about Earth Day and Earth Day focused. She has lots of summer camps coming up. I'm sure they all will, but hers are already booked for Pelican Island, Indian River County Stormwater Science, and Stella Maris, which is a small nonprofit, as is Sprout and Sky. So she'll be working with those folks over the summer. In the Southern Lagoon, this is Kalita's area. Kalita was one of Heather's students for the Florida Master Naturalist Uplands module, so she is now a Master Naturalist for Uplands. She also attended Indian River State College has instituted a Science Student Success Advisory Panel, and they had their inaugural meeting last quarter. She is on the board for Little Growers, which is one of our grantees, and so she is helping them do capacity building for their board and also helping the programs along as they run it, roll out. Also did the Riverland Garden Club and the Stewart Corinthian Yacht Club. Presentations to both of those organizations were well received and well attended. And then coming up this quarter, St. Lucie County had their Earth Day event April 18th, so that has already been completed. She was our liaison for Youth Driven Cinema, which was held at the Lyric Theater. And that was a cinema contest, a film contest for students from elementary school all the way up into high school. We sponsored prizes for that, but this was for students in St. Lucie County and Martin County. And again, really well attended. I was a judge for the films that got submitted, and we will share that link with you when it comes out. It's not quite out yet. But the films were phenomenal, even from the youngest grades on. They were all really, really awesome. And then lastly, she did the Manatee Center Lunch and Learn presentation in May. So this is the roll-up for all of their engagement last quarter. So 22 government meetings, 48 events, 25 presentations, 34 community meetings or outreach meetings, 6 times in the field, and 63 other activities. And this could be symposia or conferences, webinars, any other kind of thing like that. So 198 total. And that is it for me.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
Moving on to information technology and data science update.
Hello, Commission. It's been a really, really busy quarter. So I am now working with the Open Wetlands Mapping Network. So we are updating the National Wetlands Inventory data for the entire United States, which is awesome because for some of y'all that have used it, no, some of it hasn't been updated since the 70s. So we're using a whole bunch of remote sensing techniques to get updated wetland imagery for the entire United States, including Alaska and Hawaii. I hosted 3 What's Up in the webinar watershed. So if you guys haven't been a part of that, we host it. What am I doing wrong? This? Okay, cool. what's it called? If you guys are a part of that, you guys are more than welcome to sign up for it. It's on our website. I'm going to be talking about a project that I'm working on next, but I kind of developed a concept plan for the Northeast Restoration Team, or NERT. What's it called? We've had a lot of harmful algal bloom meetings. I attended the cyanobacteria symposium for 4 days, which was over 60 sessions about cyanobacteria and work that's going on across the U.S. EPA hosted that. And then been doing a whole bunch of cross-agency work, working with the Wetland Deep Dive National Community, working with Chuck at the Flood Hub, working with UCF on another project that I'm working on, and also, Dwayne gave me the opportunity to go to ESP, which is, I don't know their acronym for ESP, but
there is no acronym.
It's just ESP
advisors.
But it's a legislative training, so it gave me kind of the federal information of how we get our the National Estuary Program through the House and the Senate. So I kind of have more of an understanding of that. Also, AI has been a hot topic for everything, so there's been a lot of federal use of AI that I've been learning about as well. So this is really cool because it's something that I'm bringing to y'all. I came up with 2 case studies for myself for the IRL. So I'm working with Lauren Hall at the St. John's River Water Management District to look at the difference between seagrass and Caulerpa prolifera. So we're using GIS and machine learning to basically see if we can differentiate between the 2 different species. So we're actually looking at the spectral signatures or the light reflectance from each of these species to see if we can actually tell the difference, which is really cool. I'm also working on another concept where I'm looking at decadal shoreline change. This was kind of sparked from that whole discussion on if we can do work on private land. So using that land cover, land use data to look at, what we have already done and where to go from there, and looking at the past 10 years to see where we've lost most of our land along the IRL. Everybody else does a snapshot. So I did my snapshot. I went to 11 webinars. I had 6 technical practitioner meetings. I hosted 3 webinars, had a regional presentation, and then I have 2 active applied research projects that I'm doing for the NEP. So it's been very fun, very busy. And I want to thank everybody for the opportunity and letting me branch out a little bit. So that is all.
Questions or comments? Thank you. Next up is the IRL project update.
All right. So at the end of the quarter 2, we had 40 CCMP projects or activities still in progress, and 1 project wrapped up this past quarter, and I'll kind of go into that a little bit. I'll just preface before I go into this that there is a really, really good presentation from the PI on this project on Brevard County's Citizen Oversight Committee webpage for their SORL program. So if you want to learn more about this project, please go there and watch Melanie do her presentation. So the project was a pilot project that we funded with them to develop a citizen science outreach program for homeowners associations to improve their stormwater, come up with best management practices, and to maybe help reduce stormwater inputs to the ponds that they manage. They had 4 HOAs that were part of this program, Country Walk HOA, Tortoise Island HOA, Longwood, and South Lakes. And the HOA had participation in this project in a couple of different ways. They could either be active, planting plants in their ponds, taking water quality samples, or they could also be passive and just kind of answer some surveys or that type of thing. And in total, there was 434 hours of volunteer time attributed to this project. One of them, as I mentioned, was water quality sampling. So they got trained on how to do that, the SOP, collecting it, wearing PPE, doing blanks, all that calibration. Also, working with the county to get those samples collected and on time and that type of thing. And then this is just some of the preliminary data from that. And you can see it varies quite a bit between the different HOAs. Some of them have a lot lower numbers than others. And I think that's indicative of just, practices that are going on in those HOAs before this program started. But you can see Country Walk, this is a famous, I should say, notable HOA. The head of that association, Meg Murphy, she's actually made national attention with she's a real go-getter, been on a couple of programs called Flip My Florida Yard and How to Do Florida with Chad Crawford, famous videographer. And so You can see some of these datas here. Their chlorophyll's been going down, which is great news. Some of the other ones, Tortoise Island, slight increase in nutrients and a slight increase in chlorophyll. But hopefully after the project's been implemented, they can start seeing those numbers go down. Longwood, kind of slight increase in nitrogen, but a slight decrease trend in chlorophyll. However, you can see the levels there. It's close to eutrophic. And then same with South Lakes, also very eutrophic data coming from that pond. And then this is just some of the part that was done after they started their initial sampling. Let's do some projects too to maybe help those ponds. They did at South Lakes here, they did a bank stabilization, put in this little structure you can see there in the picture, and they also did a lot of littoral planting around the pond. For Country Walk, they did a dredging, a geotextile installation, and then, of course, planting this along the shoreline. Tortoise Island, similar, did a lot of aquatic planting as well as some upland planting. You can see that all here. And then Longwood, again, more planting around the perimeter of the pond and using a lot of native plants and aquatic plants as well. Just some more pictures from that. That's it. And like I said, please go view the COC meeting and to get more information about this project if you're interested. But I'll answer any questions if I can.
Questions for Dan? Thanks. Next up is the Executive Director report.
So the legislative update can be one word, uncertain, but I do want to give you a quick update. I spent 2 full weeks in Washington, D.C. First week was with EPA, our normal spring meeting, and making the rounds about estuaries and seeing where the support was. Second week was actually with the business community, Space Coast Economic Development Commission, a lot of the space launch providers that are doing work at Kennedy Space Center, both private and public. And so where we stand is that we very easily got through the House reauthorization back in November, and we're still waiting to see where the Senate will pick up our 5-year reauthorization. My guess, and I'm just guessing, is that we'll probably be bundled with other reauthorizations at some point, and then the Senate will take it up. They had no indication that we're in any jeopardy for reauthorization. Appropriations next year, when we start October 1, we're stable. You notice that we're budgeting flat, not only in next year's budget, but the year after that. But, appropriations, we're watching it closely. And at the state level, you're all watching it as much as I am. We don't have a budget. And I think they're going to convene a special session. Is it 2 weeks? Yeah, sometime in the next 2 weeks. The governor asked, pursuant to his executive order back in 23, when we created the Indian River Lagoon Protection Program, asked for this fourth last year for $100 million. The House and the Senate budgets do not have that amount in their budgets, so we'll have to see where that reconciles. And I don't even want to talk about numbers because a lot can happen in reconciliation. But as soon as I know, probably, especially those of you who are living, with ad valorem, will be hearing it even before I do. Want to also mention our fiscal year. We do mid-year updates, and it's not in your package, but we do this mid-year and final year to EPA. And just wanted to let you know, how many pages was it? Surprised us. 14 full pages, bulletized. And I'm going to just go ahead and email that, because then you can see what the last 6 months looks like. And so my team, the community engagement, everybody's been really busy. And you saw that on the quarter. When you roll it up in 6 months, you kind of go, was there enough time in 6 months to do all this? So we've had a productive year. 2 other things I want to bring up. First and foremost, Virginia Barker, Brevard County, she's the Natural Resources Director, called me up and she said, we're putting together kind of a summary of where the Save Our Indian River Lagoon program is as it relates to this last year of revenue generation. So November, will end the revenue coming in Brevard County. And remember, that is $500 million over 10 years, actually more. And so Virginia gave a really comprehensive and clear overview of not only the productivity, and I'm already on the record, but I can't say it enough. When I look around all of our national estuary programs, none stand out more than Brevard County's sorrel program, both in the context of the amount of investment that our citizens made in Brevard County, but also how that money's being applied to projects, quantified, reviewed with a citizen oversight committee. And I know if I had put this in an email and said link, many of you are just way too busy, and it's not going to happen. So I made copy of that presentation so you can see not only what's happened as we move to that 10th year, and those of you who are on the street, it doesn't matter, where you are, there is no surplus money here. There'll be money that's earmarked for specific projects that will go beyond the revenue share, but the Board of County Commissioners very soon, I think this month, will be, looking at language for the referendum language on that discretionary sales tax. So for the first time, kind of in a big picture, we saw what a management conference from a national estuary program can do in support of our partners and stakeholders. And you all gave me direction back in August a year ago, and one of those directives, both at the federal and state level, was do what we can to help our partners find money for the Indian River Lagoon. And so we actually did that. Virginia made her presentation. She was looking for just feedback. Is there anything that we might not be considering in the first 10 years, if this passes in November, that we should be considering with the Board of County Commissioners? And it was unanimous. And I just want to give you the size of this peer review last week. In the management board, we had 30 voting members, both in presence, it was a full house, and online, and we had 15 guests who weren't officially voting members. Immediately following, we had the Science, Technology, Engineering, and Modeling group. That was 23 scientists with voting privileges and 15 guests. And remember, this is Volusia County all the way to the southern end of St. Lucie. Every single one of those members supported sorrel. They all recognize, that these waters really don't recognize political boundaries. And there was some really good comments, some good suggestions. So it was all positive. And then lastly, I want to just thank our partners at EPA Region 4 for coming on down. I don't know how Dan did it and Kathy did it, but we had one of those days on the water that are hard to find with no wind, no rain, no chop. It was a beautiful day yesterday. And it really demonstrated, and even those of us are here, we know how many partners we all work with. You see, 40 projects moving forward. Dan does his update. Kathy does hers. But often we don't understand the impact we have until we're actually on the water, in the room, talking to our partners. And I want to thank Commissioner Clasby, asked me to come down to St. Lucie County it was 2 weeks ago now. And it was, come down, let's have a conversation about, how do we find money? How do we get grants? What are the opportunities moving forward? We had a great conversation, I think, including with the ports director. But what I left the room with was kind of that emotional individual connection, because some of the St. Lucie staff, and this was not prompted, they said, we are so thankful that the council is putting money on the table, helping us with projects, in areas where the other funding entities, whether it's federal or state, may not hit some of these projects. And so I left there really feeling good for my whole team, because our citizen engagement coordinators, they're on the street and they're making a difference. But that to me kind of nailed home that it's not, how long do those seagrasses actually survive after you plant? What is the metric of success? And a lot of the metric of success is your leadership, this really large management conference that we've put together, which is really a collaborative governance model. And I don't think 40 years ago, 30 years ago, maybe Congress was thinking how this would work best. But there's no question in my mind, after we took the tour yesterday and we had staff helping us at these sites, it may not be a ton of money, definitely not as much money as Brevard County is bringing to the table at over $50 million a year. But even these small grants are making a difference. So thanks for your leadership. You give us a lot of leeway as staff to, do what you want to do. And it was very clear this week, that we make a difference both on the ground, but with the human beings, the people that we're working with. So thank you. It's been a fun week.
And
that's
all
I have.
And I'd like to thank Dwayne. And also, I think it might be appropriate to ask Dwayne to send a letter on our behalf to the Region 4 EPA Administrator, thanking them for their help, for their support, mentioning how grateful we are for these site visits, that sort of thing. Excellent.
I will do that.
Thank you. Next up is IRL Council member reports. Let's start off to my right.
Okay. And the St. John's, you've heard a lot of it from Lauren. Lauren kind of took my thunder for half my report, by the way, but they've been very busy in the Upper Basin. The staff has recently presented the draft of the 2026 Indian River Lagoon and Upper St. John's Basin plan at public meetings and outlined regional priorities and objectives. That's been done. The C10 water diversion project continues to move forward with most of the geotechnical and survey field work being completed. There's been some regional storytelling and partner collaboration on the Connected by Water episodes highlighting lagoon restoration efforts. So the staff and the St. John's have been very busy getting the word out about what we're doing and where we're going. Being a member of that board has been an honor. It's so nice to have projects done on time and on budget by the St. John's staff. And the Upper Basin is working as planned from 1980 when we first thought about it, Henry Dean and I and others. Dr. Charlie Ty, when we first sat down and said, we're going to preserve 200,000 acres of farmland that was polo fields and there was sugarcane fields at one time and citrus groves, so we're going to take it all off of production and make it a water utopia. Everybody thought we were nuts. Well, here we are 45 years later, and it's what we would hoped and dreamed it would be, 200,000 acres of restoration beauty. And it can be done. So the more aggressive that we could be, Madam Chairman, on thinking out of the box, the better for the Indian River Lagoon. A couple of thoughts I had just sitting here that I've been on Dwayne for these. I bring them up all the time. I really think that boat storage, I keep my boat in Martin County, and I've kept it in St. Lucie County and in Indian River County at in-and-out storages. And I've watched through the years in the 1960s and 70s, everybody cleaned their boat in the marina in the water. That's what we did. We put our detergent and we scrubbed our decks after fishing, and your marina would turn into a sea of bubbles. And what we were doing to the animals in the lagoon was awful, but we all did it. That was the way we did boating in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Well, we put boat racks up. Now, we all thought we were been smart enough to put boat racks from Taylor Creek all the way down into, every marina did boat racks. So you're up there and you scrub your boat now, and the acids and the chemicals we use to clean our boat drip down and land on cement, and that cement by gravity feed goes right back into the Indian River Lagoon. Go to any marina, and I keep mine at Pirates Cove, and I've kept it at Taylor Creek, and every marina does the same thing because they're very, very close to the edge of the water. They don't have a way of recycling that water, and even though we've moved it out of the lagoon, it ends up in the lagoon. And there's got to be maybe a cost share program to step those people into capturing that, like we did in citrus, to capture when we fertilize, we put plastic liners where we transfer from the truck, the big trucks that bring in the fertilizers to our growers. We just, whatever was messed up, whatever you missed from the truck going into your smaller trucks just fell in the ground in the grove. Well, now we put plastic liners under to capture that, and to put it back into your trucks saves the grower tens of thousands of dollars. Something similar for underneath these boat racks. I mean, a cost share program worked for citrus on our huge scale. It certainly can work for a small boat marina that uses very toxic chemicals, and I use them. I use all those toxic chemicals because I want my boat at Pirates Cove on a manatee pocket to look good. So, and everybody in the thousands of boats. But it's just one step. I'm thinking of cleaning up the lagoon is a small step, but a cost share program for marinas. I think we need to look at sunscreens. I watch kids up there outside the Stewart Inlet at the sandbars. They all put the spray on. They jumped right in the water. They don't wait. They have their sunscreen on. They get in, and it's hitting the mangroves and impacting the mangroves right there. I've watched it over the years of where I throw an anchor out and have a sandwich, and it's killing those mangroves, the coating from the sunscreens. And there's got to be a program or a way to stop that or outline it. They've outlawed these sunscreens in Hawaii and in Australia at their reef systems because they found there's a huge impact. Why don't we try to save our lagoon and our reef system and our mangroves by outlawing some of the chemicals of some of the sunscreens? That'd be a start. And the last thing is plastics. I've mentioned this a million times, and we've had studies by FIT. There's 1.4 trillion microplastics floating in the lagoon system still, and there's more. Every time I go out, I go nuts. I use my gaff, and I gaff bag after bag, balloon after balloon along the edge of the water. Plastics are everywhere. And if we can make a plastic-free zone for the Indian River Lagoon, it would be a big first step. That's it.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've already discussed a little bit about the water quality at the very beginning of the meeting, which again is very, very good news to hear for us. But we do have a lot of good stuff going on in Indian River County. The city of Vero Beach's irrigation line across the Indian River Lagoon into Johns Island, which they're taking 3 million gallons of water a day out of the main relief canal, which dumps into the Indian River and goes across the river. They piping it to their old water plant, cleaning the water as much as they could with just filters, not with any chemicals, running it across the river in an underground pipe that crosses the river into Johns Island. And the Johns Island has a mini facility there where they pump it into their golf course lakes and stuff like that. And all that is being used to irrigate the golf courses and the Johns Island properties for all their grass. And it's working great, and it's a great idea. And we're looking forward to see how much further that goes. The biggest thing that we have right now, I don't want to put her on the spot unless she wants to come here and say something about it, but with our Natural Resources Department has obtained funds, and we have a boat now that will go to all the anchored boats and be able to take their septic out, which is huge. And I don't know, anything you can add, help me out with this? Add to this. This is Melissa Meisenberg, our lagoon specialist, and she did all the work for this, and she's the one that handles all our abandoned boats and derelict vessels and stuff. So
It's actually very exciting. My name is Melissa Meisenberg. I'm the Lagoon Resources Manager for the Natural Resources Department in Indian River County. We partnered with the Clean Water Coalition of Indian River County and the Indian River Land Trust to purchase a pump-out boat. We received the Clean Vessel Act grant, and the Clean Water Coalition provided $10,000 for operations and maintenance of the boat. And we also received close to $30,000 for the match for the grant from the Indian River Land Trust. They have agreed to partner with us on this and be able to service all of the boats within Indian River County, pumping out that septage from the boat that is anchored in the lagoon, whether they're temporarily there or they're long-term residents. So this is a great opportunity, particularly since we have a no discharge zone from the Vero Beach to Fort Pierce Aquatic Preserve. We want to make sure we do not have boats in that area that are discharging. And we want to also prevent those discharges from the Malabar to Vero Beach as well. So we're really excited to have this come on. The boat was delivered a couple of weeks ago. It is still being processed, but it's a great opportunity. It can hold 350 gallons of sewage at a time. And we're lucky that we now have this to be able to prevent those discharges from taking place. We know that that's a big source of nutrients in our area of the lagoon.
That's it. Thanks, Melissa. That's really, I mean, we have a lot of other stuff going on, but that's the biggest thing. It's working great.
And Bard.
Thank you. So obviously we do a lot in Brevard. We tax ourselves to be able to do a lot in Brevard. Virginia sent me a progress report. I'm not going to read the whole thing, just a little bit. Completed to date 133 community projects and 2,499 homeowner completed projects. Wastewater treatment plants, package treatment plants, fixing sewer leaks, septic upgrades, oyster restoration, clam restoration, all of it. And the outcome basically is the nitrogen pollution in the Banana River and Northern Indian River has been reduced from 1.6 to 1.15. Harmful algae blooms have decreased from severe to low. And the blooms that we associate with fish kills have subsided, which is great. Seagrass has begun to recover, according to Virginia and her team, extending by about 10,000 acres since 2021. I do want to say a couple of things, though, about Brevard County and our ability and desire to tax ourselves to make the lagoon better. When you talk to your neighbors, which I do all the time, and they say to me, Kim, why are we taxing ourselves when we let companies just dump whatever they want in the water? It's hard. It's a hard conversation for me to have when we don't have control over what DEP approves or what they don't approve. So I am hopeful that we will again approve in Brevard County this tax to continue to clean up the lagoon. But I'll tell you what, the conversations we've been having lately with residents, it's not as easy as it was. So.
To Indian River County, Martin County has had a pump out boat for about 5 years, and feel free to adopt this. We have named it. It's called Ms. Poop. It's been an extremely successful program, very popular with boaters. We adopted a very aggressive septic to sewer program about 8 years ago, and determined our goal was to have everyone in Martin County be on sewer within 10 years. We're not going to make it, but we're going to be very, very close. We're really making wonderful progress. We have a half-cent sales tax for conservation purposes. We're continuing to purchase properties and to purchase conservation easements. We just had a closing on Barbie Ranch, 1,700 acres in western Martin County. Really, really stupendous habitat. It has a conservation easement. We will continue to fund that program aggressively. Some of the best news coming out of Martin County is we have not applied biosolids to surficial for 25 or 30 years, but it's a problem because throughout Florida, many jurisdictions do apply biosolids to the ground. So we've done every method that we can to try to minimize the damage that biosolids produce, and we signed a contract with a Seattle-based company, Cedron, several months ago. It's for a new plant in Indiantown that we broke ground on a couple weeks ago, and we are going to deliver all of our biosolids to Indiantown, to the Cedron plant, and it uses heat, extreme heat, 800-degree heat, in order to make the biosolids, the byproduct, inert. So it's a wonderful project. There's going to be a lot of capacity. So if anybody needs to re-examine what they're doing with biosolids, there's a really wonderful alternative that's going to be available in 18 months. Very, very aggressive. And also, we're continuing with Indian River Lagoon South, which is our Everglades restoration project. The engineered projects are ongoing. One of our last projects will be dredging 9 million cubic yards of muck from the Indian River Lagoon and St. Lucie estuary that's accumulated over the last 120 years. We have been, with being mindful of this over the last years, we have done development orders that require developers to do environmentally sound projects, and we now believe that we may have about 300 acres that's available, ideally located for a spoil site for not the entire 9 million cubic yards, but a whole lot of that. So we hope to get additional support from cooperation from the Army Corps of Engineers to complete this project. Thanks.
First of all, I'd like to say I wish that you would join the, whatever it is, 11 or 17 other people running for governor and run for governor of Florida. I'd vote for you.
Talking to me?
Yeah.
Look at them. They're all going like this.
Talking to you.
I appreciate the thought, but
not doing it, huh?
Not doing it.
All right. Dr. Raines, that was an eye-opening report. Thank you for bringing it to us. Thank you for your students here that have worked on that. I really do want a copy of that slide. It's the very first slide. It is a conversation we have all the time in Volusia County, even at on the county council level when we talk about developing wetlands. Every single time it comes up, I'm told we don't develop wetlands. I have pictures of us filling in wetlands. We leave a little wet spot in the middle and call it the, where all the runoff goes. Most of the runoff goes because the properties are raised so much, it goes to all the neighborhoods around them that are now flooded. So one of the things that we have decided, the public in Volusia County has decided that the best way to combat the way that we're developing and where we're developing is just to buy the land. So we have a program called Volusia Forever that has a very low millage rate, and so every property owner pays into this. Tuesday, we bought, I think it was 1,300 acres with 2 miles of shoreline on the St. Johns River, and then where it extends to the west, it has has shoreline from some of the tributaries that end up in the Indian River Lagoon. So we've taken that land out of the possibility for development. Part of the public says it would never be developed. I've heard that, as probably everybody up here has, for years. Well, that'll never be developed, and pretty soon we're developing it. We also are starting 2 septic to sewer. Actually, they've been started. Now we're trying to fund it, so we are taking donations for this, for a septic to sewer program in Oak Hill, which will definitely affect the lagoon, and then another one around Gemini Springs and DeBerry that affects the St. Johns River. Both are important. Both are in danger. So I was glad that that passed. And funny things happened during, there's half of my council is running for reelection. And so all the people that were against buying land during the campaign season, it was a unanimous vote for it. Everybody's for land conservation when they're running for office because the public's for it. And part of the reason for that is the work that you do here, that we do here. You're doing a good job of getting the word out to the public of how important it is to protect our water. And so the more that the public is moved, the more we'll see a change in attitude of elected officials. I'll conclude with a down note that I think is going to have a happy ending. We have one of our cities in Volusia County that has, there's so much sewage because of development. Nobody knows what to do with the sewage anymore. Nobody knows how we're going to provide fresh water to everybody, but the sewage is a big problem. And so now there is a move all over the state, but it's hit Volusia County, that will just clean up the sewage water to drinking water standards. It's like cleaned up reclaimed water, and we'll put it in the aquifer so that cities don't lose their cup limit as they're getting close to reaching the maximum amount of water they can pump out. We'll just put cleaned up sewage water. The public calls it poopy water, into the aquifer so that we don't lose our cup, and because we don't want to just spread it on the ground. The public, as you can imagine, is not for that. There's two ways of doing it. It's called toilet to tap. You just clean it up and then put it right back into the drinking water supply and let the public drink it, or put it into the aquifer to help the cup limit. I have an organic farm, regenerative farm. We're on a well, and that would affect every well in the county. All the PFAS, all of the other toxins, pharmaceuticals would be in our wells. So we have to find a different way to handle the amount of sewage. So I love hearing what you're talking about with biosolids. So brought it to the council to get a amendment on the county charter to ban either one of those things, toilet to tap, toilet to aquifer, and it lost 4-3. However, the public was angry about that, and so now there's a very public move to get each of the cities, 16 cities in Volusia County, to do their own ban. And it's come before 2 city councils. One is Daytona Beach, the other is the little town of Edgewater that's on the lagoon, and both of their city commissions voted unanimously to do an ordinance to ban it immediately, and then a charter amendment for their city charters to ban it permanently, because any future political body can change an ordinance. It's easy. So we want to put it way up high on the top shelf where politicians can't just touch it so easily. And it would require a vote of the people to say, oh, we changed our mind, go ahead and put our cleaned up sewage into to our drinking water or aquifer. So I don't know if any other counties are hearing of that. It is happening in Florida, and a lot of testing. And so we're going to stop it in Volusia County. So thank you again, Dr. Raines.
So for St. Lucie County, just like to go ahead and thank Dr. DeFries for coming to talk with our couple directors that I really am trying to encourage to start applying for more things. I told them all that I want to see at least every category. We need at least one application in. That way at least they're moving towards projects that even if we don't get the grant, we'll have projects on the books to start doing improvements. Our anchoring limitation area, that has been something I've been trying to get accomplished since I've been elected. to encourage sailboaters to move out of our inlet, and then to also have a reason to go check their log books on if what they're doing with their gray water is moving along. And the signs for that will be installed this next week. And then we have an agreement with FWC, Fort Pierce, and our sheriff's office to enforce it. Hopefully we'll have a Miss Poop boat soon to go out there and assist. We've had 2 Army Corps projects going on our beaches, one to the far south, which is complete. That one put 255,000 cubic yards of sand. The one that's to the north at Fort Pierce Jetty is 350 cubic yards of sand. Those projects go through all sorts of issues with mechanical breakdowns and that sort of thing. So they have till May 15th to get as much sand as they can. We're not going to hit our number, so they may actually have to come back out next year and mobilize for free, apparently, to finish the project. In addition to that, this upcoming fall, in 2022, St. Lucie County put in a sand trap in our inlet, and it's currently holding about 70,000 cubic yards of sand. We will be dredging that and putting it on the beach this upcoming fall, which will be needed. In Safe Harbor, which is on Taylor Creek, they're currently undergoing Taylor Creek and Fort Pierce, they're currently undergoing a demucking process. It's not the millions of demucking like you were saying, but it's about 8,000 cubic yards of muck. So that's going to go to our designated Taylor Creek muck site. Director Shipyard at the Port of Fort Pierce is currently out to bid to provide fresh asphalt caps over open areas on the terminal. It's currently a brownfield, so we're going to be having modern drainage that prevents just all the runoff going straight into the river, and that will be getting underway very soon. Then our Harbor Point Regional Boat Ramp, which is our first new boat ramp since 2003 in Fort Pierce, is at 60% design plans, and when it gets to that, the design plans will be done this month. It'll be going out to permit and then out to bid. I'm really looking forward to that. FDOT has completed the Fort Pierce New North Bridge to the point where on May 15th, traffic will be diverted to the new bridge. The new bridge will bypass the train, and that's just going to be crazy for everybody. And then also the current bridge is a drawbridge, so no one will have to wait to get over anymore. The full project won't be done until late 2027. They're demoing all of the old bridge, and it will be going out to become an artificial reef. In addition to that, we also have a 0.5-cent sales tax in the ballot this year. It's to renew our infrastructure sales tax, which is like roads and stormwater areas and sidewalks. But this year we've added conservation lands to that. So it's kind of all one pool of money, but we'll have more versatility with what we can do with it. And those are the updates for St. Lucie County.
Good afternoon. I know it's early and I don't want to jinx this, but I'm going to plug some hurricane preparedness and some stuff that we're working on with your staff, both at the county and municipalities, that we'll be doing before we meet next. So I just want to highlight a few things, particularly when it comes to your utility directors and your drinking water and wastewater operators. We're going to be coordinating with them in the next month or two. Training for Water Tracker. It's highly important during a hurricane and storm event that they get in there and provide, it takes just a few seconds. It's a really good interface, but they provide facility status, operational status. It's really critical for both your residents and for us to know the operations of your water utilities during the storm. So there's that. Also, your solid waste folks at your counties and the municipalities for disaster debris management sites, getting those registered and ready to go. So if a storm comes, that both you and us are not scrambling trying to get those stood up and get those functioning to handle disaster debris. That's all I got. Thanks.
South Florida Water Management, very busy since last summer's agreement between the Army Corps of Engineers and the state, where they accelerated funding for a lot of our projects. It's kept Drew and his team very, very busy. I guess of note in our neck of the woods, they did complete the C-23 diversion canal, which I think we haven't had to use it yet. It's been so dry, but it will give us the ability to divert a lot of water that would normally go into the lagoon into the C-44 reservoir. So that will be put into operation as soon as we really need it in this summer when it starts to rain. The other thing we've been doing during the dry season, taking advantage of the very low lake levels, there's been a number of projects on Lake O to do the kind of work to remediate some of the environmental issues that you can only do when it's really low. So the low lake has been a real benefit in that regard. Obviously, we don't want to see it get too much lower because we've got a lot of folks that are relying on it. But that's basically it. I mean, there's a tremendous amount going on with the acceleration of those funds, but you know, it's very exciting times to start seeing some of these really big projects get over the finish line.
Thank you. Those are all illuminating reports. It's wonderful to have great partners. Our next meeting is August 21st at 9:30 here. And if there's no further business, we are adjourned.
Thank you.